When you talk about leadership, the idea in everyone's mind is of a remarkable leader, a charismatic individual. But actually, the leadership of organizations is not like that. The leadership of organizations is inspirational and visionary.
I have a rather simplistic idea of a good leader, perhaps oversimplistic. I think a leader is a person who has a vision of what can be and should be, and the ability to motivate other people to share that vision, make it their own, and then make it happen. Which is another way of saying the leader's main job is to inspire, and not to direct.
För mig som ledare för en stor sjukvårdsorganisation som är så komplex som den är, så är en stor del av mitt arbete att inte göra den komplicerad utan försöka förenkla och facilitera och se till att de professionella i min organisation, vilket ju alla är, de är väl utbildade och vet vad de ska göra, men det gäller för mig att göra det tydligt vart vi ska och göra det enkelt att samarbeta och vara öppen och transparent. Så att facilitera skulle jag vilja säga och förenkla är mina två huvuduppgifter. Och när jag då har gjort det så måste jag själv leva det jag lär.
Our definition for leadership is very simple. We define it as people follow you. And that notion is it's not necessarily the person with the highest title in an organization or not the person with the most formal management responsibility in an organization. It's the person in a group of people who others are following.
Anyone who depends on their job title for the exercise of leadership or management is misguided, in my view. Any leader in any organisation is dependent on other leaders within that organisation. And the leadership happens not at particular or distinct levels in the hierarchy, in my view, but rather where we have people willing, both as individuals and collectively, to identify issues and solutions to these issues, and who have the space and the skill and the autonomy to deliver the solutions that they develop and devise.
I mean, clearly there are brilliant leaders, but my belief is that the whole system should be leader-proof, that culture should be leader-proof. If the leader comes and goes, it doesn't mean that the whole edifice is shaken to its roots. It means that they persist with the mindfulness, with the good habits, with the good actions that were present before.
Leadership, particularly in high-risk, complex organizations like a hospital, has to be a property of the system and not dependent on the frailty and the temporary nature of an individual's contribution.
Det är precis så att organisationen är egentligen den som dikterar vilket ledarskap man behöver. Men man behöver också som ledare veta vem man är själv. För man kan inte idka något ledarskap som man inte är sann mot sig själv i.
That culture change takes a long time. That takes psychological safety. That takes an empowerment of people to do that. It takes creating an environment where every day people see improvement as something that they can work on. It's not just the day-to-day activities that people do, but it's encouraging, growing, mentoring, getting people involved in some leadership activities.
Hur jag gör för att få chefer och ledare i organisationen att ta ansvar och utveckla det vidare och egentligen göra mig onödig. Det är genom att vi jobbar nu mycket mera i tvärprofessionella team som äger sina egna resultat och också äger rätten att förbättra och förändra sitt arbetssätt inom givna vissa ramar. Och det här är ju belöningen faktiskt bara autonomi, att man får bestämma själv. Och det visar sig att det här fungerar oerhört bra. Vi har fått fantastiskt fina resultat med det här arbetssättet. Och vad man gör är att man hjälper varandra, man är kreativ, man skapar ny kunskap. Men man skyddar också varandra från att göra misstag eftersom man hela tiden hjälps åt. Och det blir ett väldigt, som jag ser, ett väldigt funktionellt ledarskap för en sjukvårdsorganisation, åtminstone jag med mig som ledare.
It is a paradox. The boards are better leaders when they give away that leadership to others in the organisation who know more about the individual jobs they do and about their areas of difficulty and opportunity than do members of the board or the middle managers who often they use as a vehicle for their own ideas for improvement.
När för mig ledarskap i de här sammanhangen, alltså patientsäkerhet och ledarskap, så handlar det om, förutom det som vi kanske först tänker på när vi talar ledarskap, så är det två saker som krävs särskilt mycket och kanske extra. Det första är mod och det andra är kunskap. Och mod kommer ju av att det krävs en del mod att inse att den verksamhet du som chef och ledare är ansvarig för, att den skadar patienter och personer. Och många gånger är helt i onödan och undvikbart. Det kräver ett visst mod att inse det. Det andra är att det krävs kunskap, att när du väl har insett så måste du kunna göra någonting åt det. Har du bara insikten men inte kunskapen så skapar det bara ångest hos dig själv och hos verksamheten och hos alla andra. Samtidigt räcker det inte med bara kunskap, för den finns redan där. Så att då kan vi säga, hade det räckt med det så hade vi inte haft problemet. Man kan se det som en cykel med två hjul. Det ena hjulet är mod och det andra hjulet är kunskapen. Det behövs två hjul för att det ska vara en cykel och det fungerar inte utan det ena. Och det intressanta är att det kan ju gå båda vägarna också.
It's this moment of letting go of a series of beliefs. We've got to do that. Healthcare is grounded in a series of beliefs about design and the nature of care and the pursuit of improvement that won't work. That's the first courage. The second courage isn't the courage to reconsider what you think. It's to courage to deal with an environment that thinks different, that thinks wrong. It's surveillance. So if you're a doctor in any country, UK, US, you name it, you're being watched, you're being judged, you're being measured, you're in an environment which assumes around you that incentive and accountability and consequences are going to control your behavior, and that if you're not acting right, we need to do something about you.
Ultimately, a leader will have to make some tough decisions about how to go forward, but making them on your own and in isolation is, in my view, weak leadership. Making them with the fullest amount of evidence and data and information is strong leadership. If you want to be a better leader in relation to change, then it is important to learn some appropriate techniques.
We've developed a model of leadership that we call meta-leadership. And the prefix meta to signify an overarching view, a wide lens on what's happening and what ought to be done to address either the problem or the crisis or the opportunity. And there are three critical dimensions of meta-leadership. First is the person. It's who you are, it's your emotional intelligence, and it's your ability to understand what your opportunities are as a leader and what are the constraints that face you. When you're leading, everyone is watching you, and you need to be cognizant of everything that you do as sending out a message, even the expression of your face. The second dimension of meta-leadership is the situation, understanding what's happening around you and what ought to or what could be done about it. And the third dimension of meta-leadership is connectivity of effort. And here, our definition of leadership, people follow you, is critically important because you're putting in place the conditions in which there can be unity of effort towards a shared mission or shared objective. And you lead in multiple directions. You lead down to your subordinates, you lead up to your boss. And so leaders who are able to do that are able to develop a mission that people believe in, creating unity of mission. People believe that there's a good here that we can achieve by working together. They embed a sense of cooperation and collaboration across those who are working together, and they're willing to share the credit. It's oftentimes said that you can accomplish a lot if you're willing to check your ego at the door. You do want order in order to ensure that different people are fulfilling different tasks and they're doing it correctly. So when leaders are working together with the primary notion of accomplishing an objective in which influence is more important than control, we call that order beyond control. And a tremendous good can come out of that. One of the points of meta-leadership that was controversial for us was the notion of leading up to your boss. There's not a great deal of literature on this, and oftentimes it's described as managing your boss. And we felt that that wasn't an honest description of what people actually could do in the relationship between oneself and one's boss. It's a complicated relationship because most of the literature on leadership is about how to lead down effectively, how to improve the efficiency or productivity of the people that report to you. And we think that's really important. When you're leading down, though, you have authority. And oftentimes you're leading down to 5 people or 10 people or hundreds, if not thousands of people who are underneath your authority. Leading up is a more complicated relationship because you often only have 1, maybe 2 or 3 bosses if you're in a matrixed organization. However, the nature of that relationship is critically important. It's possible to lead up in many different ways. One of them is you provide information to your boss, you brief your boss, you provide recommendations to your boss, and in keeping with our definition, people follow you. If part of your responsibility is to engage your boss in those priorities, it's part of the job to influence your boss. Now the question then comes from our students, well, how do you do that? And in part, it's understanding what are the priorities of your boss and delivering on them. We encourage our students to learn who your boss is and what their preferences are, even in the way you give information to your boss. Some bosses like to get PowerPoint presentations. Some bosses want to read. Some bosses want to hear verbally what your recommendations are. So we teach that it's important to understand who your boss is and to be able to deliver for your boss on what the priorities might be. And once having gained the trust and confidence of your boss, it's possible to shape those priorities.
To position it at the most strategic level, our approach to leadership really starts with an assets-based proposition that we need to build on the skills and the experience and knowledge of the people that we have and help to see how they can be applied to the problems and issues that we face.
If we're talking about the culture changes that need to happen, instead of a leader saying, we've got to do this or do that, the leader calls the top leadership of the organization together and says, what kind of an organization do we want to be? What are our values? And how are we falling short of our values? What can we do about it?
We also believe strongly that a co-produced solution is likely to be much more effective, much more quickly than a superimposed, standardized solution to any problem that we face.
Method is the thing that matters most, because that burning ambition, that vision and aim, that's all very well. But if you don't know how to get from A to B, and you don't have at least a theoretical design of how you're going to improve towards to get to that end, I think you're going to flounder. And that's where I've been most of my career, that hope that things would improve. Well, let's publish a guideline. Let's do the next glossy brochure of what we should do with cardiac disease and the 130 things that every doctor should do every time they see somebody with heart failure. It's not a method. It's hope. It's not design.
What some leaders will do is they'll have this marvelous vision, and they never can get there because they don't know where they are starting from, and they don't understand all the steps and all the people that need to be brought on board to accomplish that vision. It's one of those things, if you don't know where you're going, your chances of getting there are not very high.
You do need a sense of urgency, either actually generated or artificially generated by enthusiasm and optimism and drive, so you can generate that. I don't think you need a burning platform. I think that's a myth. I think you need a burning ambition. So I think that's a different thing. And I think you can generate that from inside the system, either as leaders or even externally. You can start to drive that change on.
Resistance to change is almost always multifactorial. It's rarely caused by one particular condition or event or context. But factors that can influence people to be resistant to or accepting of change range from basic human emotion of fear or anxiety, not knowing what the future will look like and therefore preferring to remain with the present, even though that present may be uncomfortable on the grounds that the future could be even less comfortable.
It's a particular kind of change that healthcare seems to be having trouble with, and it's the change of the organization, of the way we assemble resources, people, procedures, technologies to actually meet the needs of society. We're stuck in models that don't work. They fail. So why that?
If there is a lesson in the last 2 decades, it is that top-down management, brilliant ideas from the people in charge, are not very effective. They usually concentrate on structural change or regulatory improvement. But those solutions usually fail. They are transient and often have undesirable side effects.
For reasons I don't really understand, we just built healthcare in tiny little pieces, doctors, nurses, hospitals, laboratories, even within hospitals, specialty by specialty. We disconnected all of that from the health-producing resources and attributes of communities, our schools, our roads, our food. We built pieces, and that's not what people need. If the pursuit is of health, well-being, healing, and at a cost we can afford, everything is about interdependency. It's about how the thing works together across these elements, and somehow we just haven't built that. We never built that system.
You have a world-famous physician, typically surgeons, but not necessarily a neurosurgeon or a cardiac surgeon, who's very good and who attracts many patients and is a source of revenue for the hospital and patients and so forth, who treats people very badly. How do you deal with that?
Give her 100 micrograms of fentanyl.
I can't do that.
Can't or won't.
What is the hospital's approach? Do we say, well, that's the way it is, which then demoralizes all the people who work for that physician? Or do you say we have to create an environment where that kind of conduct's not acceptable, and let's work with the doctor. If he or she will change, fine. If not, then we have to be able to say, sorry, that's not the kind of institution we want to be.
We have a methodology of negotiation and conflict resolution that we developed over the years called the walk in the woods. The story was inspired by the Cold War era negotiation that occurred in Geneva between the head of the US and the head of the Soviet delegation, where they were in an impasse and they took a walk in the woods. There are 4 steps to doing this method. First, understanding what are the self-interests of everyone involved. What are they trying to achieve? What are they hoping to accomplish? What are their concerns and fears? 2, the enlarged interest. What are the points of agreement and what are the points of disagreement? Often, people don't see the points of agreement. So the 3rd step of the walk we call the enlightened interest. And they're now having reframed their understanding of the dispute because they realize they agree on so much. The enlightened interest, what new ideas could you come up with to solve this problem? And often people will come up with a lot of new ideas, a very fertile environment, because they were so at odds with one another that they couldn't really get together on how could we solve this problem. And the 4th step, the alignment of interest, how can we create a situation where there's a point of agreement where when you succeed, I succeed, and when I succeed, you succeed. So what you're looking for in interest-based negotiation are opportunities to create mutual success or mutual benefit. When I succeed, you succeed. And when you succeed, I succeed. And that is the outcome of a walk in the woods. I was mediating a dispute between 2 groups of anesthesiologists. And I got to the 2nd step and I said, what do you agree on, all of you? And one of the people said, you don't get it. We don't agree on anything. That's why you're here. And I said, well, okay, let's see what we might find. And I asked, well, do you agree on patient safety? Everybody agreed. Do you agree on work-life balance? Yeah, everybody agreed. Do you agree that this conflict has been a huge distraction? Everyone agreed. They found 17 points of agreement, 3 points of disagreement. And of course, everyone was focused on the 3 points of disagreement.
Don't be afraid to look at examples of what has gone well, and if it would work for you, then take up that example and reuse it, rather than feeling you have to reinvent everything afresh. Remember, in any leadership position, the likelihood of you being right all the time is, in my view, 0. You are not going to be right all the time. Other people will have different ideas, other people will have better ideas, other people will have different experiences from the ones that you have. Be absolutely clear that it's not an act of failure, but rather an act of leadership to assimilate the ideas of others.